After the last book, I was just about ready to write off the whole series, but I gotta be honest, this one really surprised me. I'm serious, this is the first book that I really liked, coming from a series that up till this point had been, at best, pretty good, and at worst, this. I think it's quite telling that despite this book being a little bit longer than the others so far, I got through it way quicker. Probably because there was actually interesting stuff happening and I was invested to see where it was actually going to go. This book starts out pretty strong straight out the gate, where you have this old hermit guy who lives alone and kind of discovers Ciri, who's been badly injured, she's close to death, and then he kind of takes her in and heals her up for a while. So then the main chunk of this book is Ciri healing, getting better, and telling her story to this other guy, and we get a lot of flashbacks showing how she went from where she was before with the rats to where she was when he found her. And Ciri's plot is probably the strongest part of this book, almost making up for her having basically nothing to do in the one before. So we finally see the bounty hunter Bonhart catch up with the rats after being sent after them 2 books ago. The rats get completely wiped out and Ciri gets taken prisoner. And as it goes on, we realize a lot of people want to get their hands on her. The Emperor wants to marry her, the Tawny Owl wants her dead, Vilgefortz wants her for other reasons. And so then we follow Ciri's journey with Bonhart, eventually to the Tawny Owl, and eventually to her escape, which is where we found her at the beginning. And then when she's finally better, she decides it's time for her to go and find the titular Tower of Swallows, or Tower of the Swallow according to my copy. You know, actually I'm pretty sure that's changed between books. The Tower of Gulls as well. Now that I think about it, I did notice quite a few little inconsistencies like that. The leader of Nilfgaard's title seems to change quite a bit. In earlier books he was called Emperor, in Baptism of Fire he was called Imperator, and I think in this one they use both. I'm not sure if I can chalk this up to a translation mistake or something, but I'm pretty sure these books were all translated by the same person. Another one I noticed in this book is Ciri has a tattoo, and I'm pretty sure the location of the tattoo changes in between chapters. And because of all these minor inconsistencies, I give it 0 stars, do not read. Obviously, that's a joke, little things like that don't ruin the books or anything, but, you know, they do add up. But anyway, towards the end we follow Ciri on her continued journey to the tower, and that whole section of her journey where she's being pursued by Bonhart and Tawny Owl and Rience is also back, that whole section is great. And then the whole thing concludes with a confrontation set piece that's pretty incredible, honestly. So you've got the group of pursuers, they're tracking Ciri, they follow her tracks out onto a frozen lake, and it's foggy and they can't see very far, and she kind of picks them off one by one. And now we're finally starting to see just how deadly she really can be. So anyway, I won't go into exactly what happens at the end, but like I said, Ciri's sections are probably the best parts of this book. The other plots going on are mostly pretty good too. Geralt and the gang are still on their journey trying to find some druids to get some information to find out where Ciri is, and even though by the end they still haven't really made a whole lot of progress on that, it definitely feels a lot more like they're making progress. Because this time around, it feels like they're definitely putting in more effort to reach their goal, and the stuff that happens to them along the way is a lot more relevant to what they're actually doing. So the encounters they have in this book aren't just random groups of bandits or soldiers or a random battle that they just stumble into. So partway through their journey in this book, they get told that in the next town over, there is a group of bandits that are specifically waiting there for them to ambush them. So then that raises a lot of questions about, you know, who these bandits are that are waiting for them and how did they know where they were going to be. And then Geralt and the gang's goal becomes to, you know, find these guys, capture them and find out what they know. Even though in the end they aren't really able to get much out of them at all, it still feels like they're working towards a more concrete goal. And once again, Yennefer is here too. She has a little bit more to do than last time. We find out that she's now found herself on the Isle of Skellig, and she's been taking that time, making some calls, trying to find out what she can about where Ciri is and what's going on. And then by the end of the chapter, she kind of leaves off to find Vilgefortz and kind of, I think, intentionally gets herself captured. Now, the way I've described those events makes it sound very straightforward, but the way it's actually presented in the book is a little all over the place. The weird presentation I mentioned at the end of the previous book is back here, but like 10 times bigger. We have flashbacks, we have characters remembering things as they happened, we have characters giving testimony at a trial as to how things happened. So the stuff in the Yennefer chapter I just mentioned wasn't really told to the reader firsthand. We have Triss Merigold going to the island of Skellig to meet with Crach an Craite, I think that's his name, and him telling her what happened while Yennefer was there. But then within the telling of that story, we get to the point where Yennefer leaves with 2 ships, one ship returns, and then you have the captain of that ship telling the story to Crach an Craite of what happened while they were gone. So we're like 4 layers deep in flashbacks at this point. And it's not just backwards in time either. Oh no, we have quite a few flash forwards in this book. There's the mercenary person testifying in court, which I mentioned earlier, which takes place a year after the events that she's describing. We have a guy who is a grandson of a king several decades later remembering back as to what happened. And then we have another weird section where it jumps forward by like a couple hundred years, I think, where we see a group of archaeologists discovering a few skeletons, and with them a cylinder which we know Dandelion was using to store his memoirs that he was writing. And then that gets stolen by people who think there's treasure in it, and they find out it's just paper and they think it might be magic and dangerous, so they destroy it. And I'm not really sure what the point of any of that was. But speaking of the king and the grandson, it wouldn't be a Witcher book without the ongoing war plot that feels completely disconnected from everything else that's going on. So we have one chapter where we see Dijkstra, the spy master from Redania, going to meet with the king of Kovir, a neutral country, and ask them for military and financial aid in the war against Nilfgaard. And I know I said before that I wanted to learn a little bit more about some of the countries in this world, but did we really need to use half of this chapter to just dump the entire history of Kovir? I mean, yeah, I guess that's what I asked for. There's one part in this chapter where it mentions a map showing the 4 kingdoms, and like I had no idea which 4 kingdoms those were supposed to be. But anyway, they reach an agreement, Dijkstra gets what he needs from the king, and that's pretty much the end of that chapter, but it also throws in the little detail that they would both eventually be assassinated, which is relevant, I guess. But anyway, as I said, this was a pretty strong entry, and now I'm just wondering if they're going to stick the landing. Okay, one more thing. It's completely irrelevant to this book, but who is this? I can identify pretty much every character on all the other covers, but I have no idea who this guy is supposed to be.